When Gina Haspel took the oath of office Monday to become the first female director of the CIA, two of her biggest fans, Eliza and Zoe, were there to see it. They had both sent letters to Haspel, and we got a peek at Zoe's with her last name redacted in true CIA fashion. Quote, "I also want to be part of something bigger than myself and help America," she said. "Maybe one day I can work for you and help America."
The notes from these two young ladies, ages 6 and 7, sent to me, sat on my desk these last 2 months and motivated me daily. In their own words and pictures, they expressed their excitement about the opportunity my nomination represented. And to Eliza and Zoe, I would simply say, we did it.
Haspel said there were countless role models in her life who paved the way for her career. Now these two girls may say that about her eventually. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Here's Martha.
Thank you very much, Brett. Breaking tonight, a new report just moments ago says North Korea, according to state media, is saying that President Trump's decision to scrap the summit is not in line with the world's wishes and that they are willing to resolve the issues. That is the latest after the summit was scuttled and North Korea blamed in part comments made during our interview with the vice president on Monday.
When Kim Jong-un, through the South Koreans, reached out and said that he would suspend his nuclear testing, suspend his ballistic testing, and be willing to achieve complete denuclearization through talks in exchange for a meeting with President Trump, this president readily said yes. They asked for the meeting, and we continue to be open to it.
I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is the story. It is clear that a sequence of events and breakdown in the discussions over the recent days, including that comment, which led the North Koreans to make disparaging remarks about the vice president, led to a decision agreed to by all of the top members of the administration and ultimately decided by the president and expressed in this strongly worded letter today. Dear Mr. Chairman, it began. It went on to say, we were informed that the meeting was requested by North Korea, but that is totally irrelevant. The president then cites the tremendous anger and open hostility of North Korea's recent statement as cause for the cancellation. North Korea also claims that it was put off by this comment.
As the president made clear, this will only end like the Libyan model ended if Kim Jong-un doesn't make a deal.
Some people saw that as a threat.
Well, I think it's more of a fact. I mean, President Trump made it clear the United States of America, under his leadership, is not going to tolerate the regime in North Korea possessing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our allies.
So now all of that lines up with prior statements from the president, from the Secretary of State, from John Bolton, and now here's Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary and author of the upcoming book, The Briefing. Sean, good to have you with us tonight. You said a couple of days ago, I think this is going to happen. So given the breaking news this evening, do you still stand by that?
Well, first of all, I'm a little concerned about the interview now with you because apparently this is what's going to help determine the outcome. But I think that, look, the president's a master negotiator. He is the author of The Art of the Deal. I don't know that we've seen the end of this summit on June 12th, but I think he's made it very clear that unless Kim Jong-un makes the appropriate concessions before the United States sits down face to face with him, there will be no meeting. And I think that's entirely appropriate. Yeah. The president recognizes that 90% of what Kim Jong-un wants is this face-to-face meeting. He wants to be seen as a legitimate world leader, and the president won't give it to him unless he makes the appropriate concessions and denuclearizes the Korean Peninsula. But,
clearly there were assurances given when you see the photographs with Mike Pompeo and Kim Jong-un, right? And then you also look at the, very sort of friendly hop-skipping over the curb at the Blue House in North Korea with the South Korean and North Korean leader. I mean, it's pretty clear to the world that Kim Jong-un wanted to move in the direction of this summit. But the president keeps referring back to the possibility that the second meeting with President Xi in China is when things sort of started to fall apart. And we're learning that the communication really started to break down several days ago. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you're right in the sense that you had 3 hostages released to the United States in an act of good faith. Mm-hmm. You had an attempt to show the Western media this dismantling of a nuclear site. Those were clearly done to show that the Chairman Kim was taking the right steps. But I think that he overestimated President Trump's desire to have this meeting. And President Trump was pretty clear that until he saw additional concrete steps and concessions that showed that North Korea was truly going to denuclearize the peninsula, he wasn't going to grant him this meeting. And that's the important part. The United States and President Trump, by the way, has made this clear since the beginning, where he has said, if we get a deal, great. If we don't, we won't, and we might still, there's still an opportunity. President Trump's kept all the cards on the table. He's made it very clear that there are conditions that are going to have to be met before he grants him this meeting, and I think he's played them perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, and with regard to our interview, what Vice President Pence said to me in that interview lined up, as I said, with things that President Trump had said prior to that they wanted complete denuclearization. The president at one point said that, they didn't want the Libya model, which is complete denuclearization. But I think he was referring to what happened later to Muammar Gaddafi, and that they were giving essentially security to Kim Jong-un, that isn't how he would end up. I just want to point out we're getting some brand new information as we speak here, Sean, and a little bit more light being shed on their recent statement tonight. Leader Kim Jong-un had focused every effort on his meeting with President Trump, and they say that the president's decision today did not match with the world's desire. So it clearly appears that they're trying to reopen this door. And before I get your comment on that, I just want to play this, because the media had a field day today with the letter that came out and the response, basically suggesting that this had all blown up in the president's face. And here's what they said.
The president was rehearsing his end zone dance, and we weren't even at the 50-yard line yet.
It's amazing to me that the administration is somehow shocked that the North Koreans are acting as North Korea acts.
He must be having a giggle fit right there now in North Korea. The copy of the president's letter chumming up is kind of like a Valentine to Kim Jong-un. Really? Really?
Really? What do you think, Sean?
Well, really, I don't think we've seen the end of this. I think President Trump understands how to negotiate better than anybody because of his business background. I don't think that we've seen the end of this. He did exactly what no one thought he would do. He told from the beginning, if I can make this deal work, great. If not, I'll walk away. He's already shown he can walk away. Now Chairman Kim has to come back to the table, and I think we're going to see additional concessions. My guess is that there's a lot of chapters to be written in this book, because President Trump has shown that he can walk away from a bad deal. Chairman Kim understands that until he gets this meeting, he continues to be seen as a third-rate dictator. He needs to be seen as a credible leader, and President Trump isn't going to do anything to grant him that until he exhibits real concessions ahead of time. So I know that Director Pompeo, John Bolton, and President Trump know exactly what they're doing, and I think that some of these Democrats that are coming out are getting way too out in front of a story that hasn't seen the end yet.
What about, you didn't mention Vice President Pence in that group. Do you think he stepped out of line at all in that interview?
No, and I apologize with all due respect to the vice president. That's my fault. But I think that it's a great team that they're all part of. They know what they're doing. This is a long game, and I think that they all understand the stakes that are at hand, and that they're not going to grant North Korea a face-to-face meeting that gives the legitimacy until that they make the concessions necessary, real concrete things. President Trump isn't done with this.
Sean Spicer, thank you. Good to see you as always. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Martha.
So President Trump's announcement of the North Korea summit cancellation, which came this morning via this letter, it came just hours after North Korea claimed to have destroyed their nuclear site. But is there more to the mountain that sunk at this nuclear site? Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott live in Seoul, South Korea, with more on this story that's a really important element of understanding all of this. Greg.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, completely overshadowed by that cancellation of the upcoming summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, what should have been the banner story for Thursday. That is the destruction, the dismantling by North Korea of the one nuclear test site that we know about in the northeastern part of the country. They had brought a small group of foreign journalists to observe this. They blew up 3 tunnels, portals, structure. Apparently, the folks there on the ground said it was very loud and very strong. North Korea claimed at the time that this was a goodwill gesture, a transparent measure by the regime to promote peace and stability in the region. The hitch is, Martha, they didn't invite any international experts or analysts or observers to confirm their claims. When asked about whether they might do it in the future, they said, well, maybe, but they wouldn't commit. They even admitted that the main tunnel that they blew up, which has seen the 5 different nuclear tests, couldn't be used anymore in the future. So what was the point? And then a few hours later, Martha, the word came out via the reporters that were on the scene of the cancellation by President Trump of that summit. And apparently the officials, the North Korean regime officials, were a little bit shocked. I got to tell you, from our experience in North Korea, and we have been there several times in the past, the regime is very good at stage managing things, not too good at ad-libbing things. Because, for example, one time we were supposed to be watching a missile launch that went right, and then it went wrong, and the officials there were a little bit lost as to how to handle it. We will see now, Martha, how they're going to handle this curveball from the White House on Thursday. It is Friday morning. You, at the top of your show, were relaying the comments coming from the state media, KCNA. They seem to be coming back and saying they really want to do it. So I think, as you said, as Sean said, we haven't seen the end of this by any stretch. Yeah. It's an interesting country to deal with, Martha.
Indeed it is. Greg, thank you very much. Here now with more, Michael Malice, a North Korea analyst and author of Dear Reader. Michael, good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Martha.
What do you make of this whole thing?
Well, the talks have been breaking down for a few days now, as you mentioned earlier. The U.S. sent an advance team to Singapore, and it turned out that the North Korean counterparts were simply refusing to take their calls and to respond to them. So this is not President Trump flying off the handle as he's being portrayed by people on the left. This is him responding to being blatantly disrespected and not having any communications. At a certain point, you have to negotiate. And this is classic negotiation. You punish bad behavior, you reward good behavior. And if they're not going to be returning our calls, at a certain point, he has to draw the line.
All right. So, I mean, what potentially would they agree to? You've got the Libya model on one hand, which is a complete denuclearization, which obviously rankles them, that idea. Then you've got the Iran deal model, right? Where you see sort of an overtime and some agreements, but not an agreement to get rid of everything. What are we going to get here, if anything?
The more the term Libya model is used, the scarier it's going to be for them, because if you look what happened to Gaddafi and how he personally was murdered in the most horrific way, this is something that is of great concern to the Kim family and has been for decades. Kim Jong-il used to show this execution of Romanian dictator Ceausescu to all the party cadres daily, the video, and says, this is what will happen to you if the government falls down. So they're acutely aware of what happens when these totalitarian dictatorships collapse. And the difference between Iran and Libya is there's a partner country here, China. So there's no China vis-a-vis Iran, but there certainly is a China vis-a-vis North Korea, and we have to be concerned with what China wants and what China would allow.
Do you agree with the president, who has a couple of times now said that second meeting that Kim Jong-un went to have with President Xi, something happened there? Is that why those channels shut down?
China certainly has a very strong part to play in all this, and we don't know what's going on here. And frankly, I don't think we should know what's going on here, because so much of this is about allowing Kim Jong-un to save face, if only to force him to do the right thing.
Wouldn't China want the denuclearization of North Korea?
Yes, but they also wouldn't want us to escalate to a total liberalization of North Korea and possible societal collapse, giving them 25 million refugees crossing the river who don't speak Chinese and don't know how to use a computer. Yeah. That's the nightmare scenario for China.
All right. Well, what about, really quick, what about the mountain that collapsed several months ago? Is what they blew up today, was it even usable?
Probably not. And there are reports being that there's radiation coming out from all this other stuff. And, you know, they do not let, just like Rahm Emanuel said, they don't let a good crisis go to waste. So if something's going to be, you know, destroyed, they might as well say, hey, we're doing this because we're the good guys out of the magnanimity of our hearts.
Interesting as always, Michael. Thank you very much.
So much.
Good to see you tonight. So still ahead, a prominent Chicagoan says his city is a war zone, and he wants the president to send in the troops. plus 2 big meetings at the White House about what President Trump says was a spy in his campaign. That sparked a Trump-Comey Twitter battle tonight that is still going on. Constitutional law attorney Jonathan Turley up next. National correspondent Ed Henry live outside the White House with more of the story. Hi, Ed.
Martha, good to see you. Democrats aggressively pushing the narrative tonight that there was nothing new here. In their words, no evidence that the FBI placed an informant or a spy inside the Trump camp. But when they phrase it that way, that leaves the door wide open to one or more informants conducting surveillance of the Trump camp, even if they weren't inside. Republicans led by House Intel Chair Devin Nunes telling me tonight they can't discuss classified information. But before the meetings, in a phone interview, he told me, and he lashed out at Justice Department officials saying they are, quote, weak and pathetic, in his words, for sitting on this for so long. He believes that's why they've lost trust. The president clearly trying to take advantage of that today, again slamming former Obama-era officials James Clapper, James Comey, in the run-up to these 2 big meetings for denying there was surveillance. Clapper charging the president is twisting his words when the president tweeted today, quote, Clapper has now admitted that there was spying in my campaign. Large dollars paid to the spy, far beyond normal, starting to look like one of the biggest political scandals in U.S. history. Spygate, a terrible thing. Democrats not happy about that, or the fact that the White House had 2 top officials stop by these meetings. Chief of Staff John Kelly, White House lawyer Emmett Flood, who helped defend Bill Clinton during impeachment, is now helping on the Russia probe. Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intel panel, declared they had no business being there in the middle of the special counsel probe. But White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the 2 officials did not stay for the meetings, instead dropped by to, quote, make brief remarks before the meetings started to relay the president's desire for as much openness as possible under the law. And that's what Republicans say they want, openness. Listen.
There are serious questions that need to be answered. And from my standpoint, the top priority of this investigation is to reveal to the public exactly what happened so we can restore confidence in both the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Nothing we heard today has changed our view that there is no evidence to support any allegation that the FBI or any intelligence agency placed a spy in the Trump campaign or otherwise failed to follow appropriate procedures and protocols.
Meanwhile, today, Trey Gowdy and Bob Goodlatte, 2 powerful House Republicans, say next month they're bringing in 3 FBI officials for testimony about their handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. You put that together with this Justice Department Inspector General that we're still waiting on, and there is still a lot bubbling tonight, Martha.
That could be explosive when that comes out. It's 400 pages long, so we'll be reading. And thank you very much. So here now, Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney and George Washington University law professor. Jonathan, welcome. Always good to see you.
Thanks,
tonight. So what do you make of this meeting? Does it concern you that the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the president's new lawyer, Emmett Flood, did make a brief appearance at the meeting?
I'm not concerned about Kelly's appearance. I think it was a mistake to have Flood there. In fact, I think it was one of those sort of tin-eared mistakes that we've seen before. There was no reason to have him there. He didn't accomplish anything that I can see, but he undermined the credibility of the meeting. And once again, you're sort of looking for that adult supervision to look at these types of decisions and saying, wait, why would we want his counsel there and change this into a meeting that is connected to his personal case? And that's what's so really alarming, is that these types of mistakes are still occurring. I think Kelly's presence there was not problematic.
All right. So in terms of the substance of the meeting and whether or not there was an informant, and there's been a lot of Twitter back and forth about whether it's supposed to be called an informant. James Comey said it's supposed to be called a confidential human source. But in any event, it's somebody who was talking to some of these lower level people in the campaign and trying to fish out whether or not they were talking to anybody in Russia about these emails, right?
Right, and a lot of this rhetorical spin is transparent in itself. It's the same thing as when people said, when the president said that he felt that his campaign had been wiretapped. Everyone said, well, a wiretap is an actual tap on a wire, as opposed to the most obvious meaning of people of his generation, which is that wiretap refers to surveillance. And this is much of the same thing. There's a serious issue here of whether an informant was used targeting the campaign of the opposing party. There's also a very serious question if this individual asked, as has been reported, to either become an advisor or possibly join the administration. That would be alarming if he was an asset for the FBI and sought to become an active part of the campaign or the administration. We don't know, but the president's right.
It's a great point that you make. There are stories out there that he said he wanted to be an ambassador, and it really raises a lot of questions that I think we're going to continue to see. A quick thought on a slightly different topic. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump have now received full security clearances. There was a big hubbub about the fact that they didn't have them. Now they have them. What does that tell you, if anything, about how much scrutiny they would be under, continue to be under, if at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, with Jared Kushner, he did have to update his SF-86 and his reporting papers repeatedly. And those mistakes caused these types of delays. Presumably, they have worked out these concerns. But I don't see how Kushner can handle his portfolio without having that type of clearance.
All right, one last question, real quick. Rudy Giuliani is saying that President Trump may do the interview and that, potentially Mueller has said he might subpoena the president. Your thoughts on that?
Mueller can subpoena the president, and I've said before in your show, they got to look at what their end game is. I think he could prevail in that, but it would prolong this past the midterm elections, deeply into his presidency. So he's got to balance this, and he also has to think of this as a president, not just as an individual, of the cost that will bring to bear upon his office if this goes into the next and higher stage of conflict.
Jonathan Turley, thank you. Always good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Martha.
So coming up tonight, the American bishop who wowed the world and kind of woke up the royals at the big wedding joins me with his behind-the-scenes story. Plus, the urgent plea to President Trump to call in the troops to save Chicago.
What the hell is going on in Chicago? What the hell is happening there?
President Trump long outspoken about the levels of violent crime in Chicago. In 2017, he even threatened to send in the feds if the situation did not improve. Now, a powerful editorial by a Chicago professor begs the president to do exactly that. Jason Hill of DePaul University describes a 13-year-old babysitter, quote, having to negotiate with extortionist gangbangers who extract her half her earnings from under the pretense of protecting her life and her virginity. Hill also describes the pain of a student who tells him he has to drop out of college and join a gang because that is the only way he won't get harassed or killed. We will hear from Professor Hill in just a moment. But first, as we head into Memorial Day, the streets of Chicago are once again heating up. Trace Gallagher has the story.
Martha, this past April was the fourth coldest on record in Chicago, and by the end of April, the 2018 murder rate in Chicago was down 22% from the same 4 months in 2017. City leaders said that was proof additional police officers and new crime-fighting technology are working. Except during the first 7 days of May, as the weather warmed up, 84 people were shot in Chicago, including a 4-year-old girl sitting on a porch with her parents and a 15-year-old boy on a school bus. Of the 84 shot, 9 died. In his opinion piece, Professor Jason Hill says he avoids using homicide statistics because, quote, by the time you read this, they will have changed. Suffice it to say, they are horrible. And the professor is spot on because while Chicago talks about a declining murder rate in 2017, it's hard to ignore that 2016 was Chicago's deadliest year in more than 2 decades, which is why Jason Hill is asking President Trump to send in federal troops to counter the growing gangs, writing, quote, the potency of your presidency is ridiculed when thugs and barbaric criminals take it upon themselves to establish lawless fiefdoms, usurping the law and order which this republic was built. In December, the president himself made this analogy. Watch.
There are those that say that Afghanistan is safer than Chicago. Okay? What is going on?
And while the president has yet to send the military, he and Attorney General Jeff Sessions did send in 20 ATF agents to help tackle the explosion of gun crimes. One of the agents was shot in the face in a South Side Chicago neighborhood, though he did survive. In his editorial, Professor Hill goes on to say, quote, "Our city is under siege. It is bleeding to death by thousands of tiny scratches. In this age of nihilism, the American dream is being executed day by day by the genocidal warfare against black and brown bodies by other black and brown bodies." He ends by saying all lives matter and that the president is in a position to save them. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now, Jason Hill, professor of philosophy at DePaul University in Chicago and the author of the upcoming book, We Have Overcome, An Immigrant's Letter to the American People. Professor Hill, great to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much. I know this is an issue that is so near and dear to your heart, and you really want the president to send in the feds. How would that work?
Well, I think that Posse Comitatus has been suspended several times, or it can be suspended. I think that the president could send in the National Guard. I think that the Navy or the Marines could be sent in. I think in 1957, President Eisenhower sent in the National Guard to protect school integration. In 1992, President George G.W. Bush did it to protect the city of Los Angeles on the heels of the verdict of the Rodney King riot. And in 2006, I think President George Bush did it to send troops to the Mexican border. So I think the president has several options at his disposal that he could work very closely with local government here in Chicago.
What about Rahm Emanuel? The mayor is up for re-election in the fall. Gary McCarthy, who used to be the chief of police there, is running against him. And I know that the police have been protesting against the current mayor. Is he part of the problem or part of the solution?
I think he's part of the problem. I think we are under the mayoral governance of an impotent governor, mayor, who's doing absolutely nothing, who's complacent. And I think that sort of complacency is symptomatic of what is going on. I think that we have police who are unable to systemically and systematically fight this kind of gang warfare. This is unspeakable that in a city we have so many killings and where gangs are ruling turfs. It is uncivilized. It is unspeakable that not just in Chicago, in Baltimore, in St. Louis, in
Professor,
Detroit.
I'm almost out of time, but I got to ask you, when you look at, the NFL issue and kneeling and, police brutality concerns and all of that, are you trying to wake up people to what perhaps is a more pressing issue for African Americans in this country?
Well, there's a systematic absence of law and order that's running amok in this country, a kind of thuggish ferality that's running amok in this country. And the rule of the law has got to take form. And Americans have got to wake up and realize that a respect for the rule of the law has to be foremost and in the defense of our great republic. This is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. I'm a great patriot and defender of this country. And we need to start having a conversation that I think the far left is not willing to have. And I think that the rule of law and law and order has got to take precedence.
Well, Professor, I commend you on this editorial, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us more.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So coming up next, it was the royal event of the year. Harry married Meghan. You saw it last weekend. 29 million people watched it at Windsor. But it was an American bishop who actually stole the spotlight. Bishop Michael Curry joins me next on why he is now turning his focus toward the White House. Plus, the Saudis made global headlines saying women would still be soon be allowed to drive. So why have women's rights activists been arrested? Ayaan Hirsi Ali joins me next. Breaking news. There are some very interesting developments with Kim Jong-un. This is what he is now saying. Quote, "We express our willingness to sit down face to face with the United States and resolve issues anytime and in any format. Our commitment to doing our best for the sake of peace and stability for the world and the Korean Peninsula remains unchanged. We are open-minded in giving time and opportunity to the U.S. But listen to this part very closely. I want to conclude that President Trump's stance on the North Korea-U.S. summit does not meet the world's desire for peace and stability, both in the world and on the Korean Peninsula. He goes on to say the tremendous anger and open hostility that President Trump mentioned in the letter he means this morning is just a backlash in response to a unilateral denuclearization being pushed ahead of the planned North Korean-U.S. summit. So, to sum that up, Kim Jong-un is saying he wants to talk. He's open to talks, but it is very clear from this statement that the unilateral denuclearization is not where they want to go. And he also says that that's not what the world wants. So perhaps he's looking for a deal like Iran got, where there is a partial denuclearization and a monitoring process. Whether or not that will bring the United States and President Trump back to the table remains to be seen. But as soon as we get more on that, we will certainly bring it to you.